Admiral Reed stood at the massive viewing window of the Imperial command ship, his tall frame reflected in the reinforced glass. His eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display of a seemingly unremarkable solar system. It was just another day of border scanning for the mighty Galactic Empire, or so he thought. "My lord," one of his officers called out, "we've detected primitive space signals from the third planet." The young officer's voice carried a hint of boredom. After all, finding new civilizations was routine work for the Empire that ruled over 10,000 star systems. Reed walked to the central command table, his boots clicking against the polished floor. The hologram zoomed in on a blue-green planet, Earth as its inhabitants called it. The display showed scattered satellites, a few space stations, and some small colonies on their moon and red neighbor. "How primitive are we talking about?" Reed asked, though he already knew the answer. Every new civilization followed the same pattern. The officer pulled up more details. "They've only achieved spaceflight in the last century, my lord. Their most advanced ships use basic ion engines. No faster-than-light travel detected. Their weapons are mostly chemical-based projectiles and crude energy beams." Reed allowed himself a small smile. This would be easier than he thought. "Any signs of unified planetary defense?" "None, sir. They're still divided into nation-states, though they do have something called the United Nations." The officer paused, checking more data. "They've detected our probe, but their response has been limited to increased space activity near their planet." Reed nodded, having seen this reaction countless times before. "Prepare the standard subjugation package. We'll send Fleet Group 7, more than enough for a civilization at this level." As Reed turned to leave, his second-in-command, Captain Wells, spoke up. "Sir, there is one unusual reading. Their electromagnetic emissions dropped by 47% in the last decade. Most developing worlds show increasing emissions." Reed waved his hand dismissively. "Probably some environmental protection effort. These primitive worlds often damage their atmosphere before reaching space." He had seen thousands of worlds join the Empire. This one would be no different. The next few days passed in a blur of routine preparation. Fleet Group 7 assembled at the Empire's nearest outpost. 20 warships, each capable of destroying a continent. Their silver hulls gleamed under the light of alien stars as they prepared for yet another simple conquest. Commander Marcus, leading the fleet, received his final briefing from Reed. "Remember, Commander, this is a standard operation. Show overwhelming force, deliver the terms, accept their surrender. The Empire has done this 10,000 times before." Marcus saluted and returned to his ship. The fleet entered faster than light travel, their drives tearing holes in space itself as they headed toward Earth. What Reed and his empire didn't know was that humanity had been far from idle. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a command center that officially didn't exist, General Thompson watched the Imperial fleet's approach on a screen that shouldn't have been possible with Earth's primitive technology. "They took the bait," Thompson said quietly, looking at his assembled staff. "Operation Dark Forest is now in effect." Around him, officers monitored screens showing hundreds of hidden ships powered down throughout the solar system. Ships that had taken decades to build in secret. Ships that incorporated technology the Empire thought impossible. Most importantly, ships that couldn't be detected by Imperial sensors. The Empire thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had barely reached their moon. They thought they would find a divided planet, ripe for conquest. They thought humanity would react like all the other races they had subjugated. They were wrong. As the Imperial fleet approached, humanity waited silently in the dark. Years of paranoia, preparation, and technological advancement were about to pay off. The Empire was about to learn that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. In his quarters that night, Admiral Reed slept peacefully, dreaming of another easy victory for the Empire. He had no idea that he had just started a chain of events that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The Imperial fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Their massive ships, each the size of a small city, cast long shadows across the void. Commander Marcus stood on his bridge, looking at the distant yellow star that would soon be another point of light in the Empire's vast territory. "Begin standard first contact procedures," Marcus ordered, straightening his uniform. He had done this dozens of times before. Broadcast the surrender terms in all known languages. The communications officer pressed several buttons on his console. "Broadcasting now, sir. The message will reach Earth in approximately 20 minutes. Marcus nodded and waited. He had already planned where to place the first Imperial garrison, perhaps near the primitive settlement they called New York. These thoughts filled his mind as the minutes ticked by. "Sir," the communications officer called out, confusion clear in his voice. No response from Earth. Marcus frowned. This was unusual. Most civilizations either responded with immediate surrender or futile threats. Silence was new. Send it again. Add the standard warning about planetary bombardment. Another 20 minutes passed. Still nothing. "Sir, should we move closer?" His second-in-command asked. "Perhaps their communication technology is too primitive to reach us here." Marcus considered this. It made sense. These humans barely had space stations. "Take us in. Standard approach pattern. Scan for any defensive installations." The fleet moved forward, their engines pushing them past the gas giant they identified as Neptune. Their sensors swept space around them, looking for any sign of resistance. They found nothing. "This is strange," the sensor officer reported. "According to our initial scans, they had satellites and space stations, but I'm barely picking up any artificial objects." Marcus walked to the sensor station. Could they have hidden underground? "Unlikely, sir. Our sensors can penetrate their crust. I see their cities, their infrastructure. But their space presence seems to have vanished." As they passed the rings of Saturn, Marcus felt the first stirring of unease. Something wasn't right. Primitive species didn't just disappear. They didn't hide. They didn't stay quiet. "Full sensor sweep," he ordered. "I want to know where their ships went." The crew worked their stations, powerful Imperial sensors reaching out across space. They found nothing near Jupiter, nothing in the asteroid belt, nothing near Mars. "Sir," the tactical officer spoke up, "could they have destroyed their own space installations as some kind of defensive measure?" Marcus shook his head. "No civilization has ever done that. It would be pointless. Keep scanning." But as the hours passed, and they moved deeper into the solar system, the mystery only grew. Where were the satellites their probe had detected? Where were the space stations? Where were the primitive ion-powered ships? In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Thompson watched the Imperial fleet's progress. Around him, officers maintained absolute radio silence. Their hidden ships, scattered throughout the solar system, remained powered down. Only their most basic life support systems ran, and even those were masked by technology that had taken decades to perfect. "They're starting to worry," one of his officers whispered, monitoring the Imperial fleet's increased scanning activity. "Should we proceed with Phase 2? Thompson checked the time. "Not yet. Let them come closer. Let them think they're going mad." Psychological warfare was always humanity's specialty. Back on the Imperial flagship, Commander Marcus paced his bridge. Something was very, very wrong. He could feel it in his bones, but the sensors showed nothing. The space around them was empty. Too empty. "Sir," his second-in-command suggested, "perhaps we should contact Admiral Reed for guidance." Marcus straightened his back. "No, we'd proceed as planned. If these humans want to hide, let them hide. It won't save them from the Empire." As the fleet approached Mars, Marcus tried to shake off his growing sense of dread. He had conquered 15 worlds for the Empire. This would be no different. He was wrong. Very wrong. The red planet Mars grew larger in the Imperial fleet's view screens. Commander Marcus had finally started to relax. Perhaps the humans had simply abandoned their space installations out of fear. It wouldn't be the first time a primitive species had retreated to their homeworld when faced with Imperial might. Sir, his sensor officer called out suddenly. I'm detecting a small energy spike near Phobos. Marcus turned toward the officer. Source: unknown, sir. It's gone now. The officer frowned at his screens. Must have been a solar reflection off the moon's surface. But then another officer spoke up. Sir, energy spike detected near Deimos as well. Before Marcus could respond, the space around his fleet lit up like a Christmas tree. Hundreds of energy signatures blazed to life simultaneously. Ships appeared everywhere, behind Mars' moons, among the asteroids, even in spaces where sensors had shown nothing but empty vacuum moments before. Impossible. Marcus shouted. Where did they come from? How did we not see them? The tactical display transformed from nearly empty space into a sea of red dots. Human vessels surrounded the Imperial fleet in a perfect sphere formation. There was no way out. Sir, the communications officer's voice shook. We're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast on our own encrypted channels. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Put it through. A calm, steady voice filled the bridge. This is Admiral Thompson of the Earth Defense Fleet. I must commend you on your punctuality, Commander Marcus. We've been waiting quite a while for this meeting. Marcus gripped his command chair's armrests. How do you know my name? How are you on our secure channels? We've been studying your empire for decades, Thompson replied. Ever since your first probe entered our solar system. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? That we wouldn't prepare? On the human flagship, Thompson stood surrounded by his bridge crew. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Your empire has conquered thousands of worlds, Commander, but you've grown careless, predictable. You never considered that someone might hide rather than fight, that someone might wait and watch and learn. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, General Thompson's staff monitored hundreds of screens showing real-time data from their hidden fleet. Every human ship was powered up now, their revolutionary stealth systems still running but no longer hiding their presence. Impossible, Marcus repeated, watching as his tactical display showed more and more human ships. Your technology level, your primitives. You don't even have faster-than-light travel. Thompson's laugh echoed through the Imperial ship's speakers. Oh, but we do. We have that, and so much more. We simply chose not to show it. Tell me, Commander, why do you think your sensors never detected our ships until now? The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Stealth technology. In space, that's impossible. The energy emissions alone. Impossible for the Empire, perhaps, Thompson replied. But humanity has always been good at achieving the impossible. We had one advantage you never considered: paranoia. When we detected your probe, we didn't celebrate potential first contact. We prepared for war. Marcus watched helplessly as human ships moved into attack positions. Their designs were like nothing he'd ever seen. Angular, dark, with no visible engine emissions. They seemed to drink in the light around them, making them hard to focus on even now that they were visible. Your surrender terms were quite interesting, Thompson continued. We have some terms of our own. Would you like to hear them? In that moment, Commander Marcus realized that the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't found another primitive species to conquer. They had awakened a sleeping giant. And now they would face the consequences. Commander Marcus had been in battles before, but nothing like this. His fleet's first volley of energy weapons passed harmlessly through empty space as the human ships seemed to blur and shift, somehow being slightly left or right of where they appeared to be. Direct hits on their fleet, his weapons officer shouted, then paused in confusion. No, that's impossible. The targets, they're not where our sensors show them. Thompson's voice came through their comms again. Gravity distortion fields. Commander, your targeting systems can't compensate for what they don't understand. Would you like to surrender now? Marcus gritted his teeth. Imperial ships never surrender. All vessels, fire at will. Full spread. The space around Mars lit up with Imperial energy weapons. The massive ships launched their most devastating attacks, enough firepower to level continents. But the human fleet moved like ghosts through space, each ship surrounded by a subtle distortion that made them nearly impossible to hit. "Sir," the tactical officer shouted, "enemy ships are firing." Small projectiles launched from the human vessels. Marcus almost laughed, projectile weapons against Imperial shields. But his laughter died as the projectiles passed straight through their energy barriers like they weren't even there. Shields had no effect. His damage control officer's voice was panicked. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. They're using some kind of..." The projectiles just ignored our shields completely. On his command ship, Admiral Thompson watched the battle unfold. Phase-shifted kinetic rounds, he explained to his staff. The Empire's energy shields can't stop what's partially phased into another dimension. Amazing what humanity can develop when we're properly motivated by fear. The Imperial fleet tried to regroup, but their formation was already broken. 3 of their ships were heavily damaged, their hulls punctured by weapons that shouldn't exist. Marcus watched in horror as another vessel's engines went dark, struck by some kind of energy pulse that their sensors couldn't even classify. "Status report," Marcus demanded. "Sir, we've lost 4 ships completely. 6 more reporting critical damage. Our weapons are having no effect. We can't get a solid lock on their vessels." And the officer swallowed hard. "We're being jammed. I can't send a distress signal to the Empire." Thompson's voice returned. "Your quantum communications won't work either, Commander. We've been blocking your faster-than-light communications since you entered the system. The Empire won't know what happened here until we want them to." Marcus watched as another Imperial ship went dark, its systems completely shut down by human weapons. His mighty fleet, which had conquered dozens of worlds, was being taken apart piece by weapons and defenses that defied Imperial science. "Pull back," Marcus ordered. "All ships, emergency retreat." But as his remaining ships tried to engage their faster-than-light drives, nothing happened. They were trapped. "Specialized gravity fields around your ships are preventing your FTL drives from functioning," Thompson explained calmly. "Did you really think we wouldn't have a plan for every contingency? We've had decades to prepare, Commander. Decades to study your technology, find its weaknesses, and develop countermeasures." The battle, if it could even be called that, was over in less than an hour. The mighty Imperial fleet hung dead in space, their ships either disabled or too damaged to fight. Not a single human vessel had been destroyed. In his command chair, Marcus stared at the tactical display showing his ruined fleet. "How?" he whispered. "How did we not know? How did we not see this coming?" Thompson's response was simple. "Because you assumed, Commander. You assumed we were primitive. You assumed we were weak. But humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to innovate when we're afraid. And nothing makes humans more creative than the fear of invasion." The Battle of Mars was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Reeves stood frozen in front of the Empress, his hands trembling as he held the report. The grand throne room of the Imperial Palace, usually filled with the quiet confidence of 10,000 years of unquestioned rule, was dead silent. "Read it again," the Empress commanded, her voice sharp with disbelief. She sat rigid on her crystal throne, its usual soft glow now harsh and cold. Reed cleared his throat. "Fleet Group 7, total loss. All 20 warships disabled or destroyed. No confirmed hits on enemy vessels. Commander Marcus's final transmission indicates the humans possess technology far beyond our understanding, including," he paused, the words feeling impossible, "functional stealth systems in space." The Empress stood, her ceremonial robes flowing like liquid metal. "Impossible. No race has ever managed to hide ships in space. The energy emissions alone." A junior officer burst into the throne room, breaking all protocol. Guards moved to stop him, but the look of terror on his face made them hesitate. "Your Majesty," he gasped, dropping to his knees, "we've lost contact with the Centauri border station and the Orion Defense Fleet." And he looked up, face pale, 50 other installations across Imperial space. They're just gone. The Empress sank back into her throne. For the first time in 300 years of rule, she felt fear. "Show me." The grand hologram in the center of the throne room activated, displaying a map of the Empire. Red dots appeared everywhere, showing lost contacts. Stations and fleets that had stood guard for centuries had vanished without a trace. They're not destroyed, Reed realized, studying the patterns. They're being blocked. Just like Fleet Group 7's communications were blocked. The humans, they're already in our territory. They've been here all along. In that moment, a new signal cut through every communication channel. In the Imperial Palace, Admiral Thompson's voice filled the throne room, calm and measured. "Greetings, Your Majesty. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we needed to make our position clear." The Empress stood again, her voice steady despite her fear. "Who dares?" "I am Admiral Thompson of Earth," he interrupted smoothly. "The world your empire just tried to conquer. I wanted to inform you personally that we've demonstrated our reach. Every location that's gone dark is now surrounded by our stealth ships. We could have destroyed them. We chose not to." Reed's mind raced. "How long?" he demanded. "How long have you been watching us?" "Since your first probe entered our system," Thompson replied. "We've spent decades studying your empire, placing our ships in your territory, learning your weaknesses. Your empire never noticed because you never thought to look. You were too convinced of your own superiority." The Empress raised her chin. "What do you want?" "What we've always wanted, to be left alone. But now that you've forced our hand, we'll settle for something more formal. Our ambassador will arrive at your palace in 6 hours to discuss terms. Don't worry, you'll find them quite reasonable." The transmission ended, leaving the throne room in stunned silence. "Your Majesty," Reed said quietly, "what are your orders?" The Empress stared at the hologram, at all the red dots showing where human ships had infiltrated her empire. They hadn't just defeated a fleet, they had systematically positioned themselves throughout Imperial space without anyone noticing. "For the first time in 10,000 years, she said, the Empire will listen instead of command." She turned to her advisors. "Prepare for the ambassador's arrival. And someone find me everything we know about Earth's history. I want to understand how we so badly underestimated them." As her staff rushed to comply, the Empress watched the hologram's red dots blink. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia. But in trying to conquer Earth, they had awakened something they didn't understand. Now they would have to learn to adapt, or risk losing everything to the humans they had dismissed as primitive. The Imperial Palace's grand meeting hall had hosted thousands of surrender ceremonies over the millennia. But never like this. Today, for the first time, the Empire waited to hear terms rather than give them. Ambassador Thomas walked into the hall alone, wearing a simple black suit rather than ceremonial robes. The Imperial guards tensed, their weapons ready, but the ambassador seemed unconcerned. He carried only a small datapad. "Your Majesty," he bowed slightly to the Empress. "Thank you for meeting with me." The Empress nodded from her temporary throne, moved to the meeting hall for this historic occasion. "You have our attention, Ambassador, though your method of gaining it was unexpected." Thomas smiled. Humanity has always preferred to exceed expectations. He activated his datapad, and a hologram appeared in the center of the hall. "What I'm about to show you will explain why we chose this approach." The hologram showed a map of Imperial space, but different from any the Empire had seen. Hundreds of dots appeared, representing hidden human outposts and stations throughout Imperial territory. "Impossible," Admiral Reed whispered. "The resources required, the coordination." "Quite possible," Thomas replied. "We've been building this network for decades. Every time your ships found a new resource-rich asteroid field, we were there first, building hidden mining stations. Every time you established a new trade route, we placed observation posts along it." The Empress leaned forward. "Why show us this now?" Because our terms aren't what you expect. Thomas changed the hologram to show various human technological achievements. We don't want your territory. We don't want to rule your empire. What we want is recognition and equal standing. The imperial advisors murmured in confusion. They had expected demands for territory, technology, or resources. You see, Thomas continued, humanity has always been different. When we detected your probe, we didn't see an opportunity for advancement. We saw a potential threat. So we prepared, we hid, we watched. But now that you know we exist, we'd prefer to be partners rather than enemies. He laid out humanity's terms. Earth and its solar system would remain independent. Human stealth technology would remain their exclusive secret. But in exchange, they would share other technological advances with the Empire and establish trade relations. But why? Reed asked. With your advantages, you could demand far more. Thomas turned to face him. Because conquest brings responsibility. Empire brings bureaucracy. We've studied your history. Managing 10,000 systems is already a tremendous task. We have no interest in taking that burden from you. The ambassador gestured to the hologram, which now showed peaceful scenes from Earth. Humanity prefers to focus on innovation, exploration, and development. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to ensure no one ever threatens our independence again. The Empress studied the human carefully. And if we refuse, then nothing changes immediately, Thomas said calmly. Our ships remain in position. Your critical installations stay under our watch. And you spend the next 1,000 years wondering when and where we might strike. He paused. But we both know that's not the best path forward. The Empire's advisors huddled together, discussing quietly. The terms were surprisingly reasonable, perhaps too reasonable. But they also understood the implied threat. Humanity had proven they could bypass imperial defenses at will. Finally, the Empress spoke. Your terms are acceptable. Though I must admit, this is not how I expected this meeting to go. Thomas smiled again. That's humanity's greatest strength, Your Majesty. We're always surprising, even ourselves. He extended his hand, offering a traditional human handshake rather than the imperial bow. Shall we begin drafting the details? The Empress rose, and for the first time in imperial history, an Empress shook hands with a representative of another species as an equal. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. 5 years after the Battle of Mars, Admiral Reed stood at the observation deck of humanity's first public space station in imperial space. The massive structure hung in space near the Empire's busiest trade route, its design unlike anything in the galaxy. Ships from both human and imperial worlds docked at the station, exchanging goods and knowledge. Still hard to believe, isn't it? Admiral Thompson said, walking up beside him. The two former adversaries had become unlikely friends in the years since first contact. Reed nodded, watching as a human stealth ship briefly shimmered into view before disappearing again. Every time I think I understand your species, you surprise me again. Last week, one of your research teams revealed they'd found a way to improve our faster-than-light drives by 30%. Fear makes us creative, Thompson replied. Hope makes us generous. You gave us both. Across imperial space, the changes were dramatic. Human technology had revolutionized dozens of industries. Imperial ships now carried simplified versions of human gravity manipulators. Earth's medical knowledge had extended imperial lifespans by decades. But the greatest human secret, their stealth technology, remained theirs alone. In the imperial palace, the Empress reviewed reports from across her territory. Trade was up. Scientific discoveries had doubled. Even rebellions had decreased. No one wanted to risk attracting attention from humanity's hidden watchers. The latest cultural exchange numbers, Your Majesty, an aide said, presenting a datapad. Human entertainment has spread to over 1,000 worlds. Their movies are particularly popular. The Empress smiled. Another surprise. Humanity had conquered more through their stories than they ever could have through force. Their tales of overcoming impossible odds resonated with species across the galaxy. Back on the space station, Reed and Thompson watched a group of Imperial children listening to an elderly human telling stories about Earth. "You could have conquered us," Reed said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Thompson turned to his friend. "Because that's not who we are. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting among ourselves. We learned the hard way that conquest brings more problems than solutions." He gestured to the diverse crowd below. "This is better. Partnership, exchange, growth." In Earth's solar system, the changes were just as profound. Imperial technology had helped terraform Mars in just a few years. Human cities now dotted the red planet's surface. Venus was next, with plans already in motion to cool its scorching atmosphere. But the biggest change was in how both societies viewed the universe. The Empire had learned humility, realizing that technological superiority didn't guarantee victory. Humanity had learned to trust, slowly revealing more of their capabilities as the partnership proved successful. At the Sol System Defense Academy, once a secret facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Imperial cadets now trained alongside human ones. They learned about humanity's history of warfare, about why humans had developed such powerful defensive technologies. "The greatest weapon," an instructor told his class, "is the one you never have to use." Humanity didn't win because we had better technology. We won because we understood that peace through strength is better than peace through conquest. As the years passed, the story of humanity's emergence became legend throughout the galaxy. How a seemingly primitive species had hidden their true nature. How they had turned paranoia into preparation, fear into innovation. But the real lesson, as both humans and Imperials came to understand, was simpler. Sometimes the strongest civilizations aren't the ones that conquer the most worlds or build the biggest fleets. Sometimes they're the ones wise enough to know when not to use their power. In his private log that night, Admiral Reed made one final entry about the humans. "They could have been our greatest enemies. Instead, they chose to be our greatest teachers. And the galaxy is better for it." The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun.